is written by creator of Glee, American Horror Story, Pose, and he is writing this series and directed by Jennifer Lynch and starring Evan Peters, um, a fan favorite of the American Horror Story series, and Emmy winner of Mayor of Easttown. He's a very talented actor, um, and honestly, probably one of the best in television today. And he goes on to display that, um, playing the title character, Jeffrey Dahmer. Um, and honestly, in this series, we see a lot of the years of Jeffrey Dahmer's, past and more recent years, through his childhood to adulthood. And sorry, I made my notes I put down. And it shows in graphic detail that how he was managed to entice his victims in the apartment 213. And um, in the first pilot episode, they do have him playing the movie The Exorcist 3, which is factual. He did, in fact, watch that to get him in the mood, per se, along with Return of the Jedi. And um, it's just very eerie. Obviously, it being a true story, um, and just the fact that someone could commit so much evil in the world. And also, being a gay man myself, it hits a little harder knowing, how these crimes and all these coincidences and situations were turned down on the fact that they were spoken and called by blacks and about gays, and that it was just they turned a blind eye to it because of the race and homophobia of it all. And the show does touch very well on that, which I'm glad because it needed to be. Because in the other Dahmer movies and stuff, they don't really touch on that, and I'm glad they did here because it was done very well. Also, with Niecy Nash's performance, she was very good. I've watched her in the TV show Clean House, which is really good. She was the host of that show, and um, also one part that felt a little tacked on, not very accurate to the story, is that he steals a mannequin from the store. I read up on it that he already had the mannequin in his grandmother's closet. It didn't explain how it got there, so maybe that's how he got it. But I had the impression that it was already there to begin with, for his grandma's clothes or something. But um, yeah, that was definitely different. But a lot of it I felt like I've already seen because I have in previous movies. But also I knew about from documentaries and stuff like that because I'd follow him just because it's interesting. Um, as grotesque as it is. Um, and this is a little different, but more in detail because it does follow his, like I said, his childhood to adulthood, which is, it makes you question how he became who he was, I mean, not your average normal kid would be looking for roadkill and playing with bones and stuff like that. And honestly, I think the dad had a big part to play in that, and they do touch on that in the series as well. Is that you know he he may not have a part to play in it, but he definitely did probably the dad um, Lionel had definitely created this interest in his son, and um, it's interesting to see how this series, like I said, it does cover the his high school years, which we've seen that in My Friend Dahmer, um, and a lot of the stuff they add that we have seen in other previous documentaries and movies as well. This show is pretty graphic, given the fact it is based on a real life serial killer. Um, I was hoping they'd be more subtle, honestly, just out of respect for the families and everything, and the victims. But yeah, what surprised me the most is the fact that we've gotten to see that Dahmer, when he was in prison, he got fan mail, which I'm not really surprised about that because people are sick and they admire stuff like that for some reason. But I'm just surprised, really, also that he was allowed to get any mail at all, but whatever. um, oh, and also the Jeremy Renner version in 2002 ish, I think it was, in Dahmer. That was not my favorite version, honestly. My Friend Dahmer was the best uh, adaptation of Dahmer, but it, I think that this series alone has a lot of good points, and like I said, I like how it points out the injustices and the law enforcement and how it was, just overlooked for the reasons that I mentioned and the reason the show had mentioned. Um, but it starts off and ends really strong with the authenticity of the time period, and the costumes are great, the set designs, the cast is also obviously really good, um, and in towards the middle of the show, it starts to really delve into a different direction. Um, with some of the victims and stuff, which I think is interesting too, to get more insight on them as people. And also, it is a lot of flashbacks, a lot of back and forth to past to present, which I think could have been maybe a little more organized, but I get why they did it to keep it more flowing, more, I guess, fast paced, I guess, because the scenes can be a little long winded, even though that's not really a bad thing. I mean, just lengthier than some, but they are, very good developed scenes. So, um, and again, I do like how it touched on the prejudice of the system and the homophobic um, police, that just don't really care. And obviously, some of the victims were underage, and obviously it wasn't even looked into. Like, it was obvious, and they just took them back to the apartment, and they have just as much part to play as Dahmer did as him committing his crimes. Their blood is on the police's hands, really, because they did nothing, literally, not a thing. Um, so I'm glad to touch base with that. Um, and again, I just like how they brought all these wrongs to light, not only Dahmer's, but the enforcement, and ultimately end up helping him commit these murders throughout all these years. And on episode 7, Niecy Nash, hearing the commotion next door, that was really the most disturbing to me, because, it's something that you could kind of see yourself experiencing. I mean, not, hopefully not, but like, when you hear neighbors fighting or whatever, if you live in a complex or, you know, neighbors, you can always hear something or some sort of arguing, but you never expect something this vile. But yeah, again, the cast is really good. I do like how the series makes you wonder um, about the whole uh, the apartment that he lived in, how it was abandoned and destroyed for obvious reasons. And they had mentioned how they want it to be a memorial, which I think is, to a point, I kind of understand it because they, you know, to remember the victims and everything. But at the same time, it kind of gives remembrance to Dahmer as well and his what he's done there. So I'd say place it somewhere else, not in that location, given the fact that the crimes happened there. But I guess it's kind of like the Holocaust, you know, to have that walkthrough thing. So you know, but yeah, it was really disturbing, obviously, and you know they did also add Gacy and uh, Ed Gein, the inspiration of Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Buffalo Bill, and even Oliver Thredson from American Horror Story Asylum. Uh, so I've heard other people wanting it to be an anthology series on serial killers, um, but this is a limited series, so this will be the only season the show has, unless they just want to try to go with it anyway. Like Obi-Wan was limited, and you know people are still wanting more of that. Um, so maybe if it gets enough fans and audiences, you know, who knows? But honestly, if you're into that, watch Mindhunter. It's on Netflix. It's really good, and it has some cameos with serial killers and stuff like that, and it's really well done as well. Um, but yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on the series Dahmer. Um, you know, yeah. So that's it. Let me know what you think, and have a good day.